This is One Earth Radio. If anyone is still listening out there, you are not alone. The world feels smaller now, even though it has broken apart. The air carries a heavy smell that I cannot describe without feeling sick to my stomach. It is dark outside, darker than usual, and I hear distant sounds like thunder, but I know it is not thunder. It has been about 10 days since the first shots were fired, or at least since I first started counting. I do not know the exact start of all this madness, because it happened so fast. One moment there were news reports of rising tension between old rivals, and the next there were missiles lighting up the sky. Then came waves of panic, and then everything else. I should explain where I am. I am in what used to be an old storage room beneath a radio station building that is no longer standing above me. The top floors collapsed after the first attack in this city. I do not know if the world still calls this place by its old name. I will not name it now because it might not matter, but I can still speak. I have a working microphone, a small power source, and some battered old receivers. I have managed to get on these frequencies that carry my voice, and maybe you can hear me. Maybe you are hiding in a basement, or beneath a table, or lost in some old barn out in the countryside. Maybe you are holding a small radio and shaking hands, straining to catch a whisper of a human voice, so you know you are not the last person alive. I do not know what you face out there. I can guess. Smoke, dust, shattered glass, broken streets, ruined homes. Some say entire cities have been flattened, their lights snuffed out in a matter of hours. I have heard rumors that power grids have failed across large parts of the planet. Communications are patchy. The old networks people relied on have burned or gone silent. Governments, if they still exist, do not answer calls. Military groups are everywhere, but it is hard to know which side is which. There are armies on the move, but the lines have blurred. Strange groups roam, wearing no flags, taking what they want. I have heard that farms have been set on fire. I have heard that ships on the seas have vanished beneath black waves. I have heard that drones fill the skies in some parts of the world, watching, waiting, then striking. I have heard that nuclear blasts have turned old capitals into craters. I have heard children crying, calling for parents who never return. I have only my voice to offer. Let me try to give you what I know. In the first few days, the fighting began over some border far away. It was just a dispute at first. Then it grew. Allies joined on both sides. Old grudges flared up, bombs fell, missiles streaked across the night, cities took hits. At first it seemed like there might still be room for talks, but the talks failed. Leaders blamed each other. They said if one side did not back down, the other would respond. They did respond. They responded with steel, fire, and poison gas. They responded with heavy blasts that lit the skies for miles. They responded with weapons that none of us ever wanted to believe would be used again. My receiver sometimes picks up faint voices from other places. Most of them are crying or screaming. Sometimes I catch a distant broadcast from another lonely speaker like me, listing the names of destroyed towns, listing the numbers of refugees pouring out of broken countries. One voice I heard yesterday was a woman who said she was near what used to be a border crossing in Eastern Europe. She said thousands of people stood in line, waiting for a train that would never arrive. She said soldiers opened fire when the crowd pushed forward, then her signal cut out. I have not heard her voice since. Out in the east, I have heard rumors that a major port city was struck by a barrage of missiles. I heard that tens of thousands may have died in a single night. I cannot confirm anything. Verification is a memory of the old days, when we had fact-checkers and reporters on the ground. Now we have whispers. Now we have lost voices that break in and out of the static, telling us awful things. I must trust my instincts and share what I hear, hoping that someone else can piece together what is true. I picked up a broken speech from a man who claimed that his city, somewhere in Asia, had lost all water supplies after a nuclear blast far upstream poisoned the river. He said people were fighting in the streets over a half-full bottle of dirty water. He said he watched a group of children huddled in the wreckage of what was once a busy avenue, their faces covered in ash, their eyes wide and empty. He said he tried to help, but men with rifles shouted at him to keep walking. He said he wanted to cry, but he had no tears left. I remember the early days of all this, when we still had some form of order. Governments told people to stay calm, that it would pass, that talks were underway. But the talks ended when one side accused the other of lying. Then more bombs fell, and the cycle repeated. Before we knew it, old alliances kicked in, dragging nations that had nothing to do with the original fight into the storm. Soon every continent was lit up with battle. Missiles fired across oceans. Invisible jets streaked overhead, dropping death on cities whose names most of us had never even heard. Lines on maps no longer mattered. Everyone was a target. I have heard of people fleeing into forests, deserts, mountains, trying to find a place untouched by this madness. But even there, one cannot hide forever. Food is running low. Medical supplies are gone. People who were once neighbors now fight over scraps of bread. And when the radiation drifts in, it does not care who you are. I have heard that in some areas, the air itself glows at night, as if filled with strange fire. Survivors in those regions scratch at their skin and cough until they collapse. No doctors are left to help them. This station that I am in was once lively. I remember the sound of laughter in the halls. I remember the smell of coffee and the hum of computers. Now it is just me. My colleagues fled when the first warning sirens went off. They said they had families to protect. I understand. I had no one waiting for me, so I stayed. Maybe I was foolish. Maybe I was just too afraid to leave. Now the entrance above is blocked by rubble. Even if I wanted to go out, I would have to dig through broken beams and concrete. I survive on canned goods and stale water from old tanks. I have a small generator running on fumes. Sooner or later, I will run out of fuel. Sooner or later, my voice will fade as well. But until then, I will keep speaking. If you can hear me, if you can understand these words, know that you are still human. That matters now more than ever. There are rumors that groups have begun losing all sense of mercy, that they round up anyone they find and do awful things I can hardly speak about. I have heard that in some places, people have turned into something less than human, driven by hunger and fear. If you still care about right and wrong, if you still care about kindness, hold on to that. Do not let go of what makes you a person. The bombs can level our cities, but they cannot force us to become monsters unless we choose that path ourselves. Outside, I hear a distant boom. It might be another strike, or it might be a building collapsing under its own weight. Dust drifts through the cracks in the walls. I smell burning plastic and old wood. The air tastes bitter. Sometimes I think I hear voices just outside, people calling for help. But maybe it is just the wind. I do not have the strength to move the debris above me. Even if I could, I am not sure I would want to see what remains of my city. It might be worse than what I can imagine. Let me share more of what I know. There was a report that a major bridge connecting two countries in South America was destroyed by a missile strike. The people who used that bridge to escape one side of the war are now trapped. I heard that they tried to cross by makeshift rafts, and many drowned. Far to the north, I caught a brief signal from someone who claimed to be near a large border crossing that was heavily mined. He said he watched a family run across a field, not knowing it was filled with hidden bombs. The screams he described still echo in my mind. He was crying while telling this, his voice shaking so hard I could barely understand him. I also heard someone, a young voice, maybe a teenager, who said they were hiding in a school that had been turned into a shelter. They said they had little food left, and that the older people had begun to give their portions to the younger ones. They said the nights were filled with distant gunfire, and that sometimes strange lights flashed in the sky. They did not know what those lights were. Maybe flares, maybe something else. There are whispers of new weapons being used, things no one had ever seen before. Some claim that fields have turned black overnight, that entire forests vanished in a flash of light. Others say there are places where the ground feels hot to the touch for days after a bombing run. I have no way to confirm any of this. I only know that every story I hear is worse than the last. Some might ask, how did this happen? How did we allow it? I do not have answers. I only know that anger and fear spread faster than anyone could contain them. Maybe those who once could have stopped it failed, or maybe they never cared. Maybe it was always going to end like this, after years of building up weapons no one should have owned. Now that they have unleashed them, none of us can close the door again. I recall one voice on the airwaves, a man who said he was a pilot who refused to drop his payload on a city. He said he turned his plane around and landed in a field, then deserted. He said he tried to warn villagers nearby, but many ran from him, afraid he was lying. He said he felt shame, that he had joined the forces to protect his country, and now he saw what it truly meant. He cried on the broadcast. I never heard from him again. As I sit here, I must tell you something else. I do not know how long I can keep talking. My throat is dry, and I have to save what little water I have. But I will continue as long as I can, because if I stop, who will remember what happened here? Once we are all gone, will anyone be left to recall the madness that took us? That is why I speak. That is why I risk using the last drops of fuel in this generator. Words are all I have. Let me try to gather some of the scattered reports I have heard about various regions. In what was once part of Asia, large groups of people are said to be on the move, trying to escape areas hit by blasts. Some try to head north, hoping the cold will slow the spread of sickness. Others go south, hoping warmer lands will at least let them grow something, anything, to eat. In what was once part of Europe, old alliances are torn apart. There are too many fronts now, too many armies clashing. Towns switch hands in hours, then are abandoned, left in ruins. I have heard that some tried to form small safe zones, places where people agreed to share what they had left and not kill each other. But then raids came, or bombs fell, wiping them off the map. In what was once Africa, I heard a faint call from someone describing a coastline battered by warships firing inland. The speaker said entire fishing villages were destroyed, the survivors fleeing into dry lands where there was no water and no food. Children crying, old people collapsing by the roadside. I heard that, and I closed my eyes, trying not to picture it, but I could not help it. In what was once the Americas, chaos rules as well. Northern lands hit by strikes on key cities. Southern lands drawn into the fight when their neighbors chose sides, or when resources ran dry. I have heard of great plains turned into graveyards of metal and twisted steel, of once vibrant cities turned into silent fields of ash. It seems that no place has been spared. The old balance of power is gone. The world's factories of war keep churning out death, or did until they too were destroyed. Now what is left is a dirty struggle over what remains. Some people are reduced to throwing rocks, using hunting rifles or old knives, because the advanced weapons either ran out of ammo or malfunctioned under the stress. Among the many voices I have heard, there was one that stayed with me. A child's voice, probably no older than 12. They spoke from somewhere near what once was a busy city center. They said their parents told them to hide in a cellar. The parents went out to find food and never returned. The child waited for days, listening to distant blasts, waiting. The child said they finally crawled out and found nothing but rubble. The child kept repeating that they wanted their mother. I listened, holding my breath, as the child cried softly. Then the signal faded. I do not know what happened to them. If you are still alive, maybe you have seen such things with your own eyes. If so, I am sorry. I wish I could offer more than words. I wish I could say help is coming, but I have not heard any hopeful news in a long time. I cannot lie to you. Things are bad everywhere, at least from what I can gather. The old order is gone, and what replaces it seems even worse. There was talk that some regions tried to call a ceasefire, tried to form a truce, but someone always broke it. Distrust runs too deep now. Too many have been lost. Too much hate has been stirred up. There might be places, hidden corners of the earth where people have managed to stay out of this madness, living off the land and not bothering anyone. But if they exist, they keep quiet. They do not broadcast their location, because that might draw hungry mouths or armed raiders. Speaking of raiders, I have heard reports of groups that roam the roads in stolen trucks, armed to the teeth, taking whatever they find. People whisper that these groups do not care who they kill. They leave behind smoking ruins and bodies. Others say there are groups even worse who delight in cruelty. I shudder to think about that. If you are forced to move, try to be careful. Trust is rare now. Some pretend to help you, only to rob you as soon as you let your guard down. Some promise food but lead you into traps. The old idea of neighborly kindness is hard to hold on to in this world of ashes. Yet I must believe there are still kind hearts out there. Maybe someone gave their last piece of bread to a hungry child. Maybe someone refused to follow an order to kill prisoners. Maybe someone guided lost survivors through a safe path in the woods. Even if I never hear those stories, I must believe they happen. Without that, what is left? I will try to speak about the strange things people have reported. I do not know if they are true, or just hallucinations from shock and hunger. But some claim they saw lights in ruined streets that moved without any known source. Others claim they heard voices in burned-out homes, calling names in the dark. Some say they found footprints that do not match any animal known to them. Could this be fear playing tricks on tired minds? Or has the madness of war opened the door to things we never thought possible? I have heard a man swear that he saw figures in the distant hills after a bombing run, figures that seemed to glide instead of walk. Another voice spoke of strange sounds coming from old mines, as if something deep underground had awakened. I do not know what to make of these stories, but I share them because I have nothing else to do. In a world where so much has fallen apart, perhaps anything can happen. Sometimes I think I hear breathing in the silence when I turn off the microphone. Maybe it is just my own breath echoing in these cramped quarters. Maybe I am losing my mind. But as long as I can form words, I will continue this broadcast. We are somewhere past day 10 of this conflict. Who knows how long it has truly been? The normal flow of time feels broken. People count days by the blasts they survive, or by the few packets of stale crackers they still have left. Without stable sunlight or electricity, clocks are useless. The sky is often filled with smoke, making it hard to tell dawn from dusk. Noise comes and goes. Sometimes there are long stretches of quiet that feel even worse than the shelling, because in the quiet, we wonder what happens next. I have tried to remember old songs or poems, but my mind struggles. My memory slips away. Maybe it is the stress, maybe the lack of sleep. I close my eyes and see red flashes behind my eyelids. I open them and see darkness and cracked walls. I hold on to this microphone stand as if it were a friend. At least this device still works. At least I can still speak, even if no one answers. If anyone out there can hear me, I hope you find a safe place. If you are traveling on foot, try to move when it is quiet. If you see fighter jets overhead, hide. If you find a stream of water, boil it if you can. If you have any canned food, try to ration it. I know these are common sense things, but sometimes we forget the basics under pressure. And remember, if you meet someone who looks lost and scared, and you have something to spare, consider helping them. It might make a small difference in a world where everything else is cruel. Let me try to share more news from other voices. I recall someone saying that a major dam in the north has been destroyed, causing floods that wiped out villages downstream. Another voice said that desert lands have been bombed so heavily that the sand itself turned to glass in some spots. Another said that a high-altitude explosion caused something like an artificial aurora. Green and blue lights dancing in the night, beautiful and awful at the same time, caused by radiation and chemical fires. I wonder if there are any countries that stayed out of this. If there are places where people still sleep in their own beds without fear of a strike at dawn. If there are islands untouched by this storm of steel and fire. Maybe isolated tribes, unaware of what has happened, still live as they did before, without radios or knowledge of our madness. I almost envy them. The reports from what was once major world capitals are all similar. Massive loss of life, ruined infrastructure, people wandering aimlessly through streets choked with debris. Hospitals no longer function. Medicines are gone. The wounded lie in makeshift shelters, or simply in the open, moaning and waiting for relief that does not come. Old temples, museums, libraries have burned. The memory of human history goes up in smoke, and no one can stop it. I wish I had something hopeful to say, but hope is hard to find. At best, I can say that as long as you breathe, there is a chance. As long as your heart beats, you can try to survive another hour. Maybe if enough of us hold on, we can outlast the fires. Maybe when the weapons finally run dry, when the armies grow tired and sick, they will have to stop. And maybe then, those who remain can try to build something again, though it might take centuries to heal from these wounds. I would like to believe that not everyone who had power wanted this. Maybe some tried to warn others. Maybe someone tried to call for reason. But it was not enough. It all spiraled out of control. Now we live in the ashes of that failure. I heard a faint story about a group of survivors who found shelter in an old mine shaft. They blocked the entrance and lived by candlelight, sharing whatever they had, telling stories to keep their spirits up. They had no idea what was happening above ground, and they were afraid to leave. One of them managed to rig a small radio and picked up my signal. For a brief moment, I heard them whispering softly, thanking me for speaking. Then their signal died. I hope they are still alive. It matters that we speak to each other, even if it is one way. It matters that we remember names of places and people who once lived peacefully. I remember a time when we argued about smaller problems and never thought it would come to this. Now those old problems seem like distant dreams. Now we argue with gunfire and bombs, or we do not argue at all, just kill. If you find a place to rest, keep it hidden. If you have seeds, try to plant them somewhere safe. If you can catch rainwater, do it. Small acts of survival now mean everything. Do not give up if you can help it. Once you give up, the darkness wins completely. I will keep talking. I have to. My voice is dry, but I have a little water left. I will take a sip and continue. Please bear with me. I just had to adjust a wire. The signal was drifting. This old gear is not reliable. I must be careful. If I lose my voice, you might not hear any news from this part of the world ever again. Of course, I cannot know if my news helps anyone. Maybe you already know your own nightmares. Maybe my words just confirm what you see with your own eyes. But at least you know you are not alone in this nightmare. There is another voice out here, trapped in a room beneath rubble, speaking into the dark. Let me talk about what I remember from before. Maybe it will help us remember we were once human, in a better sense of the word. Before the war, people worried about paying bills, about going to school, about what to cook for dinner. They worried about traffic and weather. They watched shows, played games, danced, sang songs. They fell in love and out of love. They argued and made up. The world was far from perfect, but it was ours. Now it feels like we are guests in a ruin that no one owns. I remember a day when I walked along a river in the afternoon sun. The water sparkled. Birds sang. Children played on the banks. If I close my eyes, I can almost feel that warmth on my skin again. But then I open them and feel the cold dampness of these walls. I share this because maybe somewhere, someone is also trying to recall a day when life felt normal. Maybe by keeping these memories alive, we keep a spark of what made us who we are. I have also heard that some people are trying to help others. A faint call came in saying that a group in what used to be a farming region gathered survivors and tried to plant a hidden garden in a greenhouse that still stood. They were trying to raise crops quietly, away from any patrols or raiders. The speaker said if they could survive long enough, they might feed a few dozen people. I pray they succeed. Another whisper I caught said that in some remote mountain range, a handful of families found a series of caves where they stored dried food, melted snow for water, and set up a small camp. They took turns keeping watch. They shared stories by candlelight. The signal faded before I learned more, but just knowing that such groups might exist gives me some comfort. Still, comfort is rare. More common are reports of large groups of armed men moving through old highways, looting anything of value. Some set traps along roads, catching desperate travelers who just want to find a safe haven. The world has become a place where trust is deadly. Yet trust might also be the only way to rebuild something, if this ever ends. I must warn you, if you see a city skyline and think of going there to find food, be careful. Many cities are full of hazards now, collapsing buildings, radioactive zones, pockets of gas, not to mention rival gangs fighting over the ruins. Without proper gear, entering a city might mean sickness and death. Rural areas might also be risky. but at least there might be small patches of ground not yet poisoned. I say these things as if I know them for sure, but I only have bits and pieces, stories from others, crackling through my receiver. Yet these stories align in their sadness. They paint a picture of a world brought to its knees. No one prepared for this. No one knew how fast it would happen once it began. I still recall the first day I realized something was truly wrong. The television channels cut to emergency broadcasts. Sirens wailed. The air felt heavy. People rushed to supermarkets, emptying shelves. Rumors spread like wildfire, but no one believed it could get as bad as it did. Some said they would flee to the countryside. Others tried to cross borders, not knowing that soon every border would be on fire. Within a matter of days, everything we took for granted was gone. The wars of old had rules, or so we told ourselves. This one seems to have none. The weapons are too terrible, the hatred too deep, the fear too strong. I wish I could say that I believe we will wake up tomorrow to a better day. I do not know if tomorrow will be better or worse. I do not even know if there will be a tomorrow for many of us. But while I am alive, I will keep talking. If you are alive, keep listening or keep searching for some sign of hope. There is a sound now, a low rumble above. It might just be another building collapsing in the distance. I often hear these dull thuds. Sometimes I think I feel the ground tremble. Maybe more bombs are falling far away. Maybe the Earth itself is tired of all this and is shifting under the strain. If I had a map, I would mark where I think the worst fighting is. But maps mean little now. The old lines are meaningless. All I have are voices describing places by what they used to be. The old stadium, the bridge near the coast, the farmland outside the big city. Those places are gone or ruined. We must find new ways to navigate if we ever get the chance. I have a small battery-operated device that lets me tune into different frequencies. Most are static. Now and then, I catch a station trying to send out a coded message, perhaps a military channel. I cannot understand what they say. Maybe they are directing strikes. Maybe they are searching for their own troops. I turn that off quickly. I do not want to draw attention to this broadcast in case they can trace it. But I doubt anyone bothers to track a single voice down here. They have bigger targets. The smell is getting worse in here. The sewage pipes must have cracked. I have a scarf over my nose. This is my reality now. How is yours? If you are under open skies, maybe you have the wind. Maybe you see stars on a clear night. Or maybe smoke hides them. If you have someone with you, a friend, a family member, hold on to them. Keep each other strong. That might be all you have left. I heard a short broadcast from someone claiming to be near an old naval base on the coast. They said the ships are gone, sunk or fled. The docks are empty. Dead fish float in oily waters. The coastline smells of rot and chemicals. They said they saw no signs of organized rescue. Just scattered survivors picking through wreckage, hoping to find canned goods or a jug of clean water. Another voice, a very weak signal, said they saw something bright in the sky late at night. Not a bomb blast, but something like a streak of light that moved oddly. They wondered if it was a new weapon or some unexplained event. We have lost the people who could explain these things. The old experts are likely dead or hiding. We are on our own. I have been talking for a long time now. I must keep going because I promised a long broadcast. My throat hurts, but I will push on. Words are my only gift to you. Words and the truth as best as I know it. Let me try to speak of something else for a moment. Before all this, people had dreams. They wanted to travel, to learn, to build better lives. Now the only dream is a full stomach and a safe place to sleep. Is this what we have been reduced to? Perhaps for now. Survival is the only goal. Once the noise fades, if we are still here, maybe we can dream again. If you think I am only speaking of horror, you are right. But I must, because that is what I know. This is not a story with a happy middle or end. It is a record of pain and loss. Maybe by recording it, I help someone feel less alone. Maybe some future ear will listen to these words and understand what happened here. To that future ear, if it ever comes. We were humans who had so much. We had music and laughter. We had fields of grain and forests of tall trees. We had books and ideas. We had kind people who helped others. We had children who smiled in the sunlight. We had hope. But then we tore it down in a storm of war. I do not know why. I do not think anyone knows anymore. If you are alive right now, hold on to something that reminds you that not all is lost. Maybe a photograph, maybe a small trinket, maybe a memory. Let that keep you going. If you have a reason to live, you have a reason to try one more day. I will pause for a moment just to drink a bit of water, then I will continue. I am back. I had a small sip of water. It tastes stale and metallic, but it keeps me alive. My throat still burns, but I must continue. Since I started speaking, the rumbling above has grown quiet. Maybe the building above finally settled. Maybe the night outside has grown still. Night and day mean little now. With the thick smoke in the sky, light is dim even at midday. The air is colder than I would expect for this time of year. Perhaps the dust in the atmosphere is blocking the sun. I recall a voice from a distant frequency who said they saw snow falling where it never used to snow. Dirty snow, gray and brown, mixed with ash. They said people tried to gather it to melt for water, but it tasted foul. They said some who drank it got sick. Radiation, chemicals, who knows what else drifts through the air now. If you are traveling, try to cover your mouth and nose with cloth. It might help a bit. Try not to walk in open fields if you see strange burn marks on the ground. Some bombs leave behind deadly residue that can harm you even without touching you. Without proper tools, survival is guesswork. We learn by trial and error, and often error means death. I keep hoping to hear a strong voice on these frequencies, someone who can say, "We have found a safe zone, come here." But no such voice appears. Only pleas for help, cries of pain, or whispers of fear. I heard one person last night who said they found a small group of survivors who agreed to work together. They had some canned peas, a few bottles of water, and a pile of blankets. They took turns standing guard. Maybe such groups are seeds of something better, if they can avoid detection by the many armed gangs. Let me tell you what I know about the armed gangs, from what I have heard. They are often groups of desperate people who banded together under a leader who promises them food or shelter if they follow orders. They roam from place to place, taking what they need by force. Some might be former soldiers who deserted. Some might be criminals who got out of prisons when the guards fled. Some might be ordinary people who gave in to violence. If you face them, you have few choices: hide, run, or fight. Fighting is risky if you are not well armed. Hiding might be safest, but they are known to search through ruined buildings. Running is possible if you know the terrain. But what terrain remains for you to run into? The world is like a patchwork of ruined areas. No single place stands strong. I have also heard rumors of secret shelters built by the old wealthy elites, deep underground, stocked with supplies. If such shelters exist, their owners are quiet, not sending signals. They might hope to outlast the chaos and emerge later. But what kind of world will they find when they come out? Thinking of that, I remember an old story from before the war about groups who believed they could survive anything underground. They had bunkers with filtered air, clean water, seeds for planting later. If any of them managed to stay hidden, maybe they have a future. But what of the rest of us? I do not mean to depress you even more, but I must be honest. This is the world we have. I cannot pretend otherwise. Yet, as I said before, as long as we breathe, we can try to hold on to something good. A faint signal reached me once, from what sounded like a group of old farmers. They said they had a hidden cellar full of jars of preserved food. They were waiting quietly, hoping no one would find them. They whispered their fear, but also their determination to stay alive for as long as their food lasted. Maybe when things calm down, they can emerge. I hope they do. Other voices spoke of fires that never seemed to die down. Oil fields set ablaze, forests burning day and night, chemical plants releasing toxic fumes that drift with the wind. The skies over many regions are darkened not only by war, but by countless fires. Rain is rare now, and when it falls, it carries strange smells and leaves rashes on the skin of those who walk in it. If you must travel, try to find rivers that still run clear, if any remain. Boil the water if you can. If you cannot, at least strain it through cloth. Any small step might help reduce sickness. If you find canned goods, be careful if they are swollen or damaged. Food poisoning could be deadly now, with no doctors around. I think of the old world's doctors and nurses who once saved lives every day. Now many have fled or died, their hospitals bombed. Some might still be out there trying their best to help with the little they have. If you are lucky enough to find someone with medical knowledge, treat them well. They might save you or someone you care about. Caring about others is still possible. Do not let the horror steal that from you. Yes, trust is dangerous, but without trust and care, we become no better than beasts. If you have a moment where you can help someone without risking your own life too much, consider it. If enough people do that, perhaps not all goodness will vanish. I must tell you about another strange thing I heard. A caller said they found a ruined town where the wind made a sound like singing when it passed through broken pipes and hollowed-out buildings. They said it was eerie, but also oddly soothing, like the world trying to make music out of its own ruins. The caller stayed there for a night, listening to the wind's sad tune before moving on. It is odd what small comforts we might find. As time passes, I wonder if the armies still have any command structure. Perhaps generals are gone, and soldiers just follow whoever promises them safety. Perhaps the war is now just pockets of violence with no real goal. The original reasons for the war are forgotten. No one talks about them anymore. It does not matter who started it. Everyone loses. I remember reading once about old wars that ended with treaties and rebuilding efforts. But who will rebuild now, when we have scorched so much of what we need to survive? Without factories, farms, or stable weather, what can we do? It might be that our children's children, if any live that long, will grow up in a world of scraps and faded memories. Yet I keep talking. Why? Because silence would mean giving up. If someone hears me and feels less alone, maybe that is reason enough. If someone hears me and decides to spare a stranger's life, or share a loaf of bread, then I have done some small good. Let me check the receiver for any new signals. I hear someone crying softly on a distant frequency. No words, just sobbing. I wish I could comfort them, but I can only speak into this microphone. Whoever you are, I am sorry. I hope you find some rest. Another faint voice breaks through, a man whispering that he is trapped under debris, his leg broken. He begs for help, but I cannot reach him. Even if I knew where he was, I could not go. I can barely stand up in this cramped space. This is the hardest part of broadcasting, hearing cries for help and being unable to answer. I have to focus on what I can do, describe the world as it is, and hope these words help someone make better choices. If you are near a large body of water, be careful. Some say the coastal areas are patrolled by warships that fire at anything that moves. Others say the waters are filled with wreckage, making it dangerous to sail. If you have a small boat, you might try to reach an island, but who knows what you will find there. If you are near mountains, you might find shelter in caves, but watch for predators. Animals, if they still live, might be as desperate as we are. If you see strange marks on the ground where bombs fell, avoid them. Radiation might be present. If your skin itches or your hair starts to fall out, try to move away from that area. These are crude guidelines, but all I can offer. There is talk of people seeing strange lights in the night sky that are not bombs. Some think they might be satellites falling back to Earth after losing their orbits. Others say they are just meteors. Without experts, we cannot know for sure. The sky once filled with signals, now might be filled with silent metal drifting aimlessly until it burns up on re-entry. Old news said that so much happened in a short span. Now it feels like all the nations of the world have stabbed each other until none remain standing. If any government still exists, it must be in hiding. I have heard no official statements, no comforting words from leaders, no plans to end this. Just silence. If you find an old library or a place with books, consider saving a few. They might be useless for survival in the short term, but what if someday someone wants to remember how people thought before the war? Books might become rare treasures. Keep them safe if you can. Our heritage now lies in scraps. Someone once said on these airwaves that they came across a makeshift camp where people were telling each other old stories around a fire. They pretended the world outside was not burning. For a few hours they laughed and sang quietly. Then came the sound of gunshots in the distance, and they fled. Still, for those few hours, they remembered what it meant to be human. Maybe that counts for something. The silent spaces between my words weigh heavily on me. I know I must keep filling them with sound, because who knows when I will fall silent forever. My generator has only so much fuel. I have a small hand-crank device that might keep me going a bit longer once the fuel is gone, but it will be tiring. I will do it as long as I have strength. If anyone out there has found a place untouched by this war, do not broadcast it. Keep it secret. The world is too dangerous now. If you draw attention to a safe place, someone will come to take it from you. Survive quietly if you can. That might be the best advice I can give. Though I speak a lot about horror, I must also try to hold on to any faint sign of kindness. If you have a partner, hold their hand. If you have a child with you, whisper a lullaby. If you have a friend, share your last piece of bread. Let these small acts mean that we have not lost everything that made us worth saving. I recall a voice that said they found an old church still standing, and inside they lit a candle. They said people came in quietly and sat in silence, remembering better times. They did not speak, just sat there, feeling each other's presence. For a few moments they felt less alone. Then they left, taking care not to leave any trace that might bring attackers. It is strange that even in the worst times, some people seek moments of peace. The world outside my bunker is quiet now, but I know that peace can shatter at any moment. One bomb, one shell, one raid, and everything changes. Sleep lightly, if you sleep at all. Keep your ear to the ground for the hum of drones. If you hear them, hide. I have heard that drones still patrol some areas, firing at anything that moves. Others say drones have fallen from the sky as they ran out of fuel or lost their connections to their handlers. If you find a downed drone, be careful. It might still be armed. Do not try to dismantle it unless you know what you are doing. Do I sound calm? I am not calm. My heart races every time I hear a distant noise, but I try to keep my voice steady. Maybe it helps you stay steady as well. Fear is natural, but we must try to control it, or it will destroy us from inside. If you have shelter, try to store some food and water in case you must hide for days. If you have no shelter, look for places that still have walls or a roof. Even an old bus flipped on its side might give you some cover. Stay out of sight if armed groups patrol nearby. I wish I had better news. I wish I could say that someone out there found a peaceful valley with fresh water and wild berries. That a kind doctor set up a safe clinic. That a group of brave souls reached out and negotiated a truce. But I have not heard such stories. Maybe they exist and keep quiet. Maybe all we get on the airwaves are the cries of despair, because the hopeful ones stay silent, surviving quietly. In the darkness of this bunker, I sometimes think I see shapes moving in the corners of my vision. It might be my mind playing tricks. Stress does that. If you start seeing things or hearing voices that are not there, try to rest if you can. But rest is hard to find in this world. What about the larger picture? Are entire continents burning? I have heard that many coastal cities are gone, that major inland capitals have been hit by bombs. The number of dead must be huge, beyond counting. Bodies lie unburied. Disease will spread. If you find yourself in a place with many bodies, try to move on. The smell and disease will get you. Some have tried to bury their loved ones, even in this chaos. That shows that we still care about honoring the dead. If you must leave someone behind, at least say some words for them, even silently. We must hold on to any shred of humanity. I try to remember old words of comfort, but they sound hollow now. Still, I speak them in my mind, if only to calm myself. If I could sing, I would, but my throat is too dry, and my singing was never good. Maybe you can sing softly to yourself, if it gives you courage. The war rages on outside our hearing range. Even if the big battles have died down, countless small fights continue. People fight over warehouses, old supermarkets, gas stations. They fight over broken farms and useless bits of land, because what else is left? One voice said they saw soldiers fighting each other in a ruined city block, while terrified families hid in basements. When the shooting stopped, both sides lay dead, and the families slipped away, hungry and frightened, but still alive. What sense is there in that? If I had to guess, I would say that someday this fighting will slow down. if only because there will be too few people and resources left to fight over. Then we will face a quiet world of rubble and ashes. What we do then will decide if we learn anything from this. Since I cannot predict the future, I can only tell you what to do right now. Survive. Keep your eyes open, trust carefully, help when you can, but not at the risk of your own life. Hide from danger, search for clean water, ration your food, rest when safe. These simple acts mean everything now. I heard a distant broadcast from someone claiming to have seen large animals roaming deserted areas. Maybe some zoo animals escaped and now wander through empty streets. They might be hungry and dangerous. Be careful if you see such creatures. They do not understand what happened. They only know hunger and confusion, much like us. Strange how quiet my immediate area has become. I remember the early hours after the bombing here. People screamed above me, glass shattered, sirens blared. Now, just silence and my voice. The dead do not scream. The empty shell of a city does not hum. Quiet can be worse than noise because it reminds us that life has drained away. Still I talk. The sound of my own voice proves I am alive. You hearing me proves you are alive and have a working radio. That is something. Working radios are rare now. Maybe you found an old battery-powered set in a cellar. Maybe you rigged a car radio to a small battery. However you did it, you managed to listen. That means you are resourceful. Keep that mindset. Resourcefulness will keep you alive. I recall a man who broadcasted for a few hours 2 days ago, describing how he managed to filter dirty water through layers of cloth and sand. He said it still tasted bad, but it did not make him sick. Another voice talked about using old blankets and curtains to shield windows, to avoid attracting attention at night. These small tricks might help. If I hear any positive news, I will share it. But so far I have not. The channels I scan are mostly filled with static or moans, occasional distant voices cursing their fate, or calling out lost names. The world is in mourning, but with no funeral, no rites, just endless sorrow. In the old days, people would send relief teams to war-torn areas. Where would they even start now, when the entire world is torn? There are no safe bases to launch from, no stable supply lines, no standing armies of peacekeepers. Just chaos upon chaos. I should speak about what to avoid, though I have done so many times. Avoid large crowds if you can. Crowds attract attention. Avoid well-known landmarks, as they might have been targeted or turned into traps. Avoid old highways choked with abandoned cars, as they might be full of hidden dangers. If you must cross them, do it quietly and quickly. If you find old medicine, check the labels if possible. Outdated medicine might still help, but be careful. If you know nothing about it, consider if you really need it. Sometimes untreated water or rotten food can harm you more than going without. I know these are basic survival tips, but without a stable life, we must return to basics. Shelter, water, food, safety, warmth, and above all, keeping our minds from breaking. Do not lose hope completely, because then you have nothing. Even a tiny spark of hope is better than none. I once heard a voice from a mother who said she covered her child's ears during bombing raids, telling them they were just loud thunderstorms, and that soon the rain would wash the dirt away. Maybe that small lie comforted the child. Maybe we need such small comforts. The old world had weather forecasts, news anchors, political debates, sports games. Now we have this. A voice in the dark, speaking to who knows how many. Maybe just a few scattered listeners. But a few is better than none. If you must sleep, find a spot hidden from view and try not to make noise. Wild animals might be on the prowl. Human raiders too. Keep your belongings close, and if you sleep with someone you trust, take turns staying awake. Safety in numbers, but only if you trust those numbers. I have heard that some groups formed small circles of trust, each person contributing something. One knows how to start a fire, another knows how to find edible plants, another can patch up wounds. Such a group stands a better chance than lone wanderers, unless they attract the wrong kind of attention. If you have no group, you must learn quickly. The world punishes mistakes now, but you can learn from the ruins. If you find old tools, keep them. If you can start a small fire without attracting too much attention, do so and boil water. If you know how to set simple traps for small animals, that might keep you fed. But be careful what animals you eat. Some might be sick. I wish I could tell you this will end soon, but I have heard no signs of that. The airwaves do not carry peace treaties, only laments. Until the weapons run out or everyone is too tired or dead to continue, this nightmare drags on. Still, I must keep talking. If I fall silent, I abandon you and myself. Words might be weak, but they are all I have. At least I can form a bond with whoever listens. A bond of shared hardship. I will tell you a memory. Long ago, before all this, I walked along a sunny street with friends. We drank something sweet, laughed at silly jokes, and worried about nothing serious. That memory keeps me human. Maybe you have a memory like that, something that reminds you that the world was not always this way. Hold that memory close. Let it guide you through the ashes. If we survive, maybe we can rebuild some small corner of kindness. If not us, then someone after us. Perhaps these words will echo in some old recording, and someone in the future will learn from our mistakes. I know I speak of the future as if it might exist. Maybe that is my last shred of hope. Without that, I would stop talking. I have taken another sip of water, a tiny one, just enough to keep talking. The taste is awful, but it is all I have. The air feels heavier now. My lamp is growing dim as the battery wears down. I must speak by memory, feeling the microphone in my hand, trusting that my voice still goes out. You who listen, you must wonder if there is any place left on this earth that is free from war. I have no proof of such a place, but absence of proof does not mean absence of hope. The world is large, and not every corner could be destroyed so quickly. Perhaps hidden valleys or remote islands still hold quiet life. If you ever stumble upon such a place, keep it secret and safe. Someone might say, why bother? Because as long as we exist, life matters. We must try to carry on, even if we do not know how. Life is stubborn, it wants to continue. Seeds lie dormant in ash, and when rain falls, they might sprout again. Maybe one day the earth will heal, though we may not live to see it. Still, we can try not to make it worse. I have heard rumors that some people have started to gather old books on farming and simple crafts, hoping to relearn what was lost. If you find such knowledge, guard it. The machines that once fed millions are gone. We must learn to feed ourselves with our bare hands and simple tools, if we survive long enough. But that is far in the future. Right now, you must think of the next day, the next hour. Do you have a safe place to rest tonight? Can you find water tomorrow? Are there gunshots nearby? Survival is about immediate needs now. It has been many days since I heard a hopeful broadcast. Most are grim. One recent voice said they were stuck in a city center, surrounded by piles of rubble that block all exits. They said gangs patrol the streets, shooting anyone who tries to climb out. They were hiding under a collapsed building, eating rats and drinking from puddles. Their voice shook with despair. They ended by saying they might try to dig a tunnel at night, risking collapse because anything is better than waiting to be found and killed. Another voice from a distant land said that fields are strewn with unexploded bombs. People who try to gather scrap metal from old tanks sometimes lose their lives to hidden traps. Even after the armies move on, the land itself is filled with dangers. I wonder how long before the environment itself turns against us completely. With so many fires and toxins released, the air might become harder to breathe. Plants might absorb poison, water sources might turn foul. Those who manage to live might face strange illnesses. This war is not just killing us now, it may harm future generations, if there are any. Yet I talk and you listen. That is a strange comfort. Words connect us across darkness and distance. We share pain, fear, and the faint spark of hope through these fragile signals. I try to recall if I have used any words that were once forbidden, but I cannot remember much of that now. My focus is on telling this story in a plain manner, so you can understand. I must keep language simple. Many listeners may not speak this language well, or may be very young. If a child listens, I want them to understand without fear of strange words. If a child listens, I must say this. I am sorry your world looks like this. It was not always so. Some of us tried to make it better, but we failed. You must survive as best you can, and if you grow up, remember not to repeat our mistakes. Be kind, share what you have, and do not let anger and fear rule you. That might sound empty now, but maybe one day it will matter. I recall a story from another war long ago how people hid in caves and tunnels, sharing breadcrumbs and whispering lullabies to keep their children calm. If they could do it then, perhaps we can do it now. Do not give in to despair completely or all is lost. A distant crackle on the radio draws my attention. I hear someone speaking about a group of survivors who managed to repair a small water pump in a ruined town. They are handing out cups of water to anyone who comes, asking nothing in return. This is a rare piece of good news. If it is true, then at least a few souls still cling to kindness. If you are near that town, approach carefully. They might be genuine, or it might be a trap. I hope it is genuine. When I think of traps, I recall another caller who said someone pretended to offer safe shelter, then ambushed travelers for their supplies. The caller escaped by running into a burned orchard and hiding under charred branches for hours. Such is the caution we must have now. If you find old clothing, consider using layers to keep warm if the climate has changed. If you find an old bicycle, it might help you move quietly without needing fuel. If you find canned goods, try to save some for later. Do not eat it all at once. Times are hard, and who knows when you will find more. I keep giving these small hints as if I were an expert. I am not an expert in survival. I was just a radio worker who got trapped. But I listened to many voices, and from them I pieced together advice. Maybe something helps you. The sound outside is still quiet. I worry that quiet can mean something big is coming. Sometimes armies regroup and strike again without warning. But maybe they have moved on to other parts of the world, leaving this place behind. I heard a story of entire regions emptied of people. Whoever survived left. Now only ruined buildings and silent roads remain. Maybe nature will reclaim those places one day with plants growing over broken walls. Maybe animals will return. But that will take a long time. In the meantime, we live on scraps. If you have a blanket, treasure it. Nights can be cold, and comfort is rare. If you have a good pair of boots, guard them with your life. Good footwear can save you from cuts and blisters that can get infected. Small things become precious when the world falls apart. I wonder if there are still hidden clinics somewhere, with a nurse or doctor who held onto a stash of medicine. If so, they would be angels in this hell. If you are one of them, bless you for trying to help. But be careful who you trust. Desperate people can do terrible things. A weak voice comes through my receiver now, talking about a group that tried to form a chain of signals, passing messages across regions. They wanted to warn others about dangerous areas and share tips on where to find water. But their chain broke when one relay station was attacked, a noble idea ruined by violence. If only we could all agree to stop this madness. But who has the authority now? The leaders are silent or dead. The armies follow no law. Maybe in some corner of the world, a wise group has decided to lay down arms and help each other. But they stay silent, lest someone with guns find them. I try to imagine what it would take to end this. Maybe when ammunition runs out, when fuel runs dry, when those who kill have nothing left to gain. Then they might stop by force of circumstances. But that will leave billions dead or displaced, and the survivors struggling in a wasteland. Still, life finds a way. Maybe not human life in large numbers, but insects, rats, weeds, and eventually, some hard plants and animals might adapt. If we are clever, we might adapt too. But that will mean letting go of our old ways of living and learning to survive on next to nothing. As I talk, I realize how many times I have said the same things. Survive, be careful, trust no one, help if you can, find food and water. That is because our world is now reduced to these basics. The old complexity of life is gone. We live in simple but harsh conditions. If you had a skill before the war, like playing an instrument or painting, it might seem useless now. But maybe it is not. If you can sing quietly to calm frightened children, that skill is worth something. If you can draw a map to help others avoid danger, that is useful.